when it does it. There we go. Right. What's the best way to describe these sessions? So the idea of these sessions is to kind of give you a set of skills or give you an awareness of how to develop a set of skills that will help you become better designers for animation. Ultimately, that's what it's about. It's to give you a skill set to help you improve your ability to be an animation designer and understand what that actually means and what the expectations of you are if that's what you choose to do. There's a couple of reasons for it. I mean, yes, obviously everyone wants to get better at lots of different things. Yeah, you all want to improve and grow with your skill, grow your skill sets. But also it's because you're going to start producing bigger bodies of work. You probably are already actually with your year 2 projects you've got on the go at the moment. But those projects are going to scale up and up and up. They're going to get bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where you can't be a one-person show at all. Like you are not able to do everything yourself. And you will rely on someone who has a very specific set of skills as an animation designer to support your productions. Or alternatively, you will be the animation designer who is sought after to support other people's productions. To bring other people's ideas to life and to kind of help visualize them. So these sessions are designed to help support the technical skills and the critical, like the kind of thinking skills that you need to be a good artist, to be able to cinematic design and deliver digital painting skills to a high standard, to support those kinds of production. So all the stuff we're going to do over the 3 sessions, yes, it is almost entirely in Photoshop. It's like nearly 100% in Photoshop. Yes, we're using tools that you've possibly used before. But everything that I kind of walk you through and everything that I advise you to do or advise you to think about comes from this perspective of designing animation. Like if this is what it's about, designing animation and designing a cinematic experience or a moving image experience. So it's not just about how to use the tools, it's about how to use them for that goal, for that specific thing. So if you know a different way to use a tool, that's probably right as well. I would never say that your way of using the tool is wrong, but it's very likely that your way of using the tool is for something else. Okay, it has a different application, a different way that it's utilised. So kind of bear that in mind. That's what we're going to work through. So we're compressing, because this is round 2 of the digital arts toolkit. We've compressed it down into 3 sessions. So we have the first session. A lot of it is quite rudimentary. In there you probably know how to do already, which is good. That's a good thing. But it's really to get everyone up to the same level. So in the first session, it's really about knowing where you are as an individual and understanding how to use these sets of tools in the right way. How to get the right files in place, the right formats, the right structure, how to navigate Photoshop correctly in order to utilize it for this purpose, so for a digital arts kind of purpose. So that's session 1. Session 2 is compressed with session 3, so there were 4 sessions in the first round, but 2 and 3 are going to be merged together, and that session is all around a full digital painting pipeline. How do we start, and what's the appropriate strategy for starting a painting? What's the actual workflow, like a professional workflow for digital painting? And how do we know how to navigate that workflow? How do we move through each stage of it? And then the 3rd session, which is technically the 4th class, is specifically around colour. We've got a whole session just on understanding colour. Okay, and I promise you will not learn all of colour in that session. You'll just learn everything you don't know about colour, and that will spur you on. That will kind of push you forwards to keep learning and keep developing. Okay, so I just want to talk through a couple of things. Because I showed you these images when I came around and talked to all the classes about the toolkits, like way back at the beginning of term. I showed you a bunch of images, and I just wanted to refresh everyone's brains on those and kind of show you what are we actually talking about when we think of design for film, yeah? And we're not just talking about beautiful digital paintings. We're talking about digital paintings that are narrative-led. Everything's about storytelling, preparing to deliver a narrative. It also has to work in such a way that you can take that image, you can pass it on to the next person in a production pipeline, and they can utilize it. So I, as the visual development artist for a feature film or for a TV series, can produce this painting, and I can finish it, and I can show it to my supervisor, and then that can be passed on to a million different teams within the production. And every one of those teams can look at that painting and understand how it impacts their work. So the modelling, say this was for a 3D film, or say this was for a 3D film. The modelling team can take this piece of artwork and go, yeah, we get it. Okay, this works really well. We've got a really strong understanding of the character design or the props, like the hard surface materials, like the props and things that need to be modelled and textured. You can pass it on to the lighting team in a 3D production pipeline and they can go, yeah, I get it. I get how this scene is going to be lit. I understand what my job is now with regard to this scene in the film. You can then pass it on to the animators, the actual animators. They can look at it and go, yeah, I understand this. I understand kind of what the performance is going to be and what the mood is and what the kind of character demeanours are and what their behaviours are seen, and this painting really helps me. And that's what this kind of digital painting is about. If you create something and it looks pretty, and that's all it is, something that looks pretty, it's worthless. There's no point to it. You've got to create something that you can pass on to somebody else and they can use it to create a film, to create of some kind. And that's what our focus is, yeah. Does it actually have purpose? Does it serve purpose? And can you draw stories? That's the other thing as well. It's not just about it being purposeful, but the work we're going to do is all about the ability to deliver a story in a single image. Yeah, because that's what you need to be able to do. You need to, everything we design, especially as people working within animation, it should be able to deliver some kind of narrative. There must be some kind of story there. If there's no story, there's no point whatsoever. So, can everyone just open Photoshop for me? Just open it up. Just go to the Photoshop home screen. This is our plan for today.
I don't know why the keyboard doesn't work. They changed it with this one.
In the back. So odd. It's not working in any of the USB ports, no?
No, this one works. And I changed this one with this one. And
I think just switch to that machine for now. Yeah. So yeah, let's go to Photoshop and let's start kind of thinking about this. So what we're going to do today, basically, we've got about 2 hours-ish where I'm going to do a lot of talking and a lot of drawing, and you're going to follow along with me, and we're going to kind of navigate this space together. And then the last hour of the session, I want to just give you time to process what I've asked you to do and to tackle it. Yeah, and a lot of it, I mean, you should have all opened Photoshop at some point in your lives. Year 2s, of course you have. But you'll find a lot of learning comes from like trial and error, yeah, making mistakes and then understanding how the mistake was made and then what to do to fix it. So this is kind of one of the most common things that I see with Photoshop, with people who are just learning it or people who use it casually and don't do it. They don't do Photoshop. They'll open Photoshop up and this is the first screen you'll get. It's very similar to my screen, and they'll do that. They'll just hit the button and go, and won't have actually taken the time to really think about what it is they just made. So that's with very, very kind of very young users. We'll get onto that in a second. It's going to make you all sad. The other thing that I see people do is they pick this one, A4. People tend to work in A4. I don't entirely understand why. I would assume it's because it's like, that's paper and people do a lot on paper and it makes sense that you're doing something that's the same size as a sheet of paper. But actually, when we think about a digital arts pipeline and a digital painting pipeline, we shouldn't be thinking about physical paper sizes. Okay, we should never really be thinking about paper unless what we are creating is being created specifically to be printed. Okay, if it is not specifically to be printed, we should not be thinking about paper at all. Okay, instead we should be thinking about a whole different set of materials. So the first thing I'm going to show you what to do. I'm going to show you how to set up a kind of functional digital painting template to work with it. So a template that you can open in Photoshop again and again that's just really good specifically for digital painting. Okay, and it'll be reliable. So the first thing you're going to do, sit down for this so my giant head is not blocking the television. The first thing you're going to do is just go to the top in this box that opens up when you go for like File New. There's a little button just here which is the Presets button. And if you just click that, it'll give you it sort of changes its format, but the information stays the same. And this is where you can start creating the preset for your file. So I'm just going to call this D_A_2 because it's like Digital Arts 2. But before I hit any buttons, I'm just going to start making some adjustments to the size. So the first thing I'm going to do is think about what's my measurement parameters. How am I measuring the size of the file I'm about to create? Well, we don't need to think in physical sizes because we're not printing this. This is about digital art and it will only exist in a digital format. So the idea of using like millimeters or centimeters or inches doesn't make any sense. Those are physical measurements. They have no purpose whatsoever. So what we'll do instead is we'll go to pixels. And then in terms of pixel size, I'm going to advise you a specific size because it's a good size for these computers and the computing power you have. So I would go for 5,000 by 5,000 pixels. And then when it says, and underneath that it says resolution, pixels per inch. So at the moment mine's set to 300. So if there's it's saying if there's 300 pixels in every inch, the real size of your drawing is about that big by about that big. It's like that. That's not going to work. That's too small. If I ever did print it, it will just look strange. So I'm actually going to change that to 72, which might sound like a very specific number, but the reason I'm changing it to 72 is because 72 is the average pixel spacing on televisions. So the average pixel count on a TV is that it has 72 by 72 pixels in every inch of screen size for full HD. Okay, 4K tellies work slightly different, especially like the ultra 4K TVs we're starting to see. They have a slightly higher count, but generally 72 pixels per inch is a good number. So the next thing I'm going to do is just go to this color mode. When we do a session on color, we will dive into color in a lot more depth, and I will show you the difference between RGB and CMYK. But what you need to know at the moment is RGB is red, green, blue, is digital color spectrum, and CMYK is cyan, magenta, yellow, and K stands for black, which I don't know why, but it does. And that's the print spectrum. So those are the actual inks that are utilized within printers. We're not printing anything, so we would never use CMYK color. So we are going to use RGB color. We won't use bitmap color because it is not 1993. So RGB, and then we've got under that we've got this background contents. So before, I'm not going to click on. You can click on the list and you can see like you've got white, black, background color, transparent, and custom. You don't have to click that. You can actually click the color just here, and you'll get a little color box pop up like this. And then in that color box, what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter a very specific set of numbers. So there's a lot of people when they pick colors. They use the slider and they kind of find the color that they want. Yeah, that's like the go-to strategy. Is like, where do I actually want the colors? And what you'll have to do if you're going to become more and more proficient at digital painting is you need to start learning what the numerical values of colors are. Okay, and what does that mean? What do those actual numerical values mean? They can be found at the bottom of the box just here, and you can see you've got 4 different sets of colors. Okay, so you've got the hue set, you've got the HSB, hue, saturation, brightness colors, lab colors, RGB colors, and CMYK colors. They are all interlinked as well, so when you change one, it changes all of them. But it's really helpful to know what this actually means. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the color for the background that will make it as effective as possible. So the hue, I don't care about, that can stay at 0. The saturation, I'm going to set to 0. And then the brightness, I'm going to set to 50. Okay? And you'll see that creates some interesting colors. So it creates, the L on lab is 53. It turns RGB to 128 across the board. So there are some really interesting relationships about color, but we're not doing that today. Once I've done that, I'm going to click OK. Color profile can stay the same, just the standard working RGB color profile, which is fine. You don't need to start touching the colors. Standard square pixels, we're not going to start, changing the individual pixel ratios or anything like that. And then we can save that preset. And then when we do that, you'll see in Photoshop, you get like your recents tab when you create a new file, but now you've got this saved tab. And as you build up, I mean, obviously I'm using a work machine, like a college machine, so I've got a couple on here. On my own computer, I think I've got about 30 different templates that I just go to for different jobs. Yeah, if I'm making a leaflet, I've got a leaflet template. If I'm making a website, I've got a web page Photoshop template where I can work on web graphics. If I've got an actual film that I'm doing something with in Photoshop, which is pretty rare, I have a film template, 4K, 1080, and 1440 as well. So I use lots of different templates for different jobs. Photoshop doesn't know what you're doing. You have to tell it. You have to guide it to give you the right setup. So there's my one that I've just created, and you can see I've got some others there as well. There's my first digital painting, 5,000 by 5,000. We use a different one for story art as well, and then a character one, which we're going to make that one later as well. It's one of the last things I'm going to show you this morning is the character art template and how that works. So we're going to open this up. So I've selected it. I'm just going to hit create, and this is kind of what you get. There's a reason for this. There is a logic. There's a method to the madness of why have we created a giant grey square. So first off, when we think about designing anything for a narrative, so any kind of digital painting, one of the most important components is light. Understanding how light works, what it is, and then how to design it is a crucial part of digital painting. If you're working on a white background, designing light is extremely difficult because it means you have to lower the values in the space before you can lift them. Yeah, you have to go down before you can go up because white is effectively 100% brightness. The same for like if you were to just make it all black. If you make it all black, it means you can only make things lighter. How do you draw a shadow if your background's black? Very, very difficult to do. So 50% brightness as your background color is the exact middle ground, and it's the perfect balance between light and dark. So you can draw onto it with relative ease and not have to worry about the complexities of light and shadow as much. The other thing is that, as I'm sure you are all aware, when you look at a computer screen for a long time, your eyes start to hurt. Yeah, it's straining on the eyes. There is a very good reason why most software has a grey interface. You think about how much software has a grey interface. You're all doing Toon Boom at the moment, or some of you might be doing Toon Boom. Maya, Premiere Pro, everything's got a grey interface. It's because it hurts your eyes less. Yeah, it's just less strain on the eyes. So again, doing a digital painting, and I promise you, some of your paintings will take you 50 hours to complete. Yeah, spending 50 hours staring at something and not just looking at it casually. I mean, staring. Like you will be looking hard at your work, really focusing on what it is. Anything you can do to reduce the strain on your eyes is a good thing. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to start playing around with this template and just bring in the actual kind of components that we need. And then we can start looking at like what this interface is and how it works. I'll put my caps lock on so you can kind of see my cursor. So the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to create some story boxes that are just really helpful for kind of those early design processes. So the first thing we need to do is we need to go over to our rectangular shape tool, which is just here. And then before we draw anything, we need to just take stock of how Photoshop kind of works. Listen, again, this is stuff you might know, but it's good to go over it just so you've refreshed your brain. Photoshop has some key areas where certain things exist, and they only exist in those areas. Knowing where to look for a tool is half the battle to knowing how to use it, okay, and knowing how to control that tool. So what do we mean by that? Well, obviously you've got your canvas, so that's your main space in the center. Photoshop allows you to open one canvas, but also multiples. So you can open like 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 canvases, all side by side, all visible together, so you can see multiple files. Or you can just work on one like this. I'm working on it on normal mode at the moment, just regular view mode. But my actual preferred way to work is to go to screen mode just here. I like to work in full screen mode with a menu bar. So full screen mode allows you to grab your canvas and move it around, and like it's just a little bit more intuitive. You don't feel like you're working in a window, but I can't do that because of this insane setup I've got with like the laptop talks to the Huey and talks to the TV thing that's going on. So I've kept it in normal mode for today. So that's our main canvas. And then we've got kind of 3 areas. We've got our tools down here on the left-hand side. Okay? We've got our options across the top. And then we have got our adjustments and our navigators down the right-hand side. So what do all these mean? Well, obviously the tools are the tools. Yeah, they are the different tools in Photoshop that do different things. Painting, drawing, cutting out, duplicating, stamping, all of these things. But one of the things we sometimes lose sight of is every time you select a tool, the options across the top change in line with that tool. And when you click it, you are not limited to what that tool can do as soon as you select it. Every tool in Photoshop is completely customizable. And you should remember that. When I select a tool, before I do anything with it, go up to the top and look at how it's going to behave. Just double check that it's kind of okay. So the reason I bring this up now is because what I want to do is make sure that with my rectangle tool, that the fill for the rectangle has been deactivated, which it has. So I can click that little fill button and select the white rectangle with the red line through it. It means that it's empty, it's vacant. And that my stroke is set to black. So I've just gone for a really clear stroke. And then the weight of it is like a few pixels. So it's set to 10 pixels at the moment, which I'm kind of okay with. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just draw a rectangle that is approximately 1920 by 1080. So 1920 by 1080. So just an approximation. It doesn't have to be exact. You do get a rough guide. Okay, so I've drawn the box. It's not 1920 by 1080. It's 2014 by 1048. But what I can now do with that is I can go up to my options just up here. I've not deselected it. I've just drawn the rectangle. Just going to go up to my options. And I'm just going to turn that one so that I'm going to turn my width to 1920 and just hit enter. And then I'm going to turn my height to 1080 and just hit enter. And you'll see that it adjusts the size of your rectangle for you. Yeah, hit enter and it just brings that rectangle in line with what you want it to be.
Just check if it's too loud.
What, that?
Yeah.
That's lovely. It's fine. Yeah, so it's all good. So that's our rectangle. Why are we drawing a 1920 1080 rectangle? Well, we could think back to this stuff, especially that in particular. That's a 1440 image. That's a 1440 image as well. That's just off a 1080. That might be 1440 as well. But these images are designed, particularly this one and this one. They are designed for moving image products. A good image makes it into the film. Like a good digital painting will make the movie. Yeah, it will exist as a scene or as a sequence, or even just as a series of frames. Something as small as a series of frames, but it will make it all the way. So obviously that's from Jurassic World Extinction, and that was never made, but it was a pitch. But if that's the job, if our plan is to create something that can become something else, then when we're designing that, that's where our brain should be. We should be thinking to ourselves, well, if I design it like it in the same format as a shot, it will translate easier to a cinematic experience. So that's why that's 1920 by 1080. That's a full HD aspect ratio. Yeah, so that's a shot. Whatever I draw in there can be translated into a cinematic experience. So what I'm going to do with this now, I'm just going to go down to my layers down here in the bottom right-hand corner. I'm just going to right-click it, and I'm going to rasterize it. So rasterizing, for any of you who are not aware, what that does is it basically turns that shape from a smart object to a standard layer that's just made of pixels. Okay, it just flattens, it removes any of the functionality of the object, like the ability to change its size by retyping it. It gets rid of all that, turns it just into a rectangle. Then what I'm going to do is right-click, and I'm just going to duplicate that. So I've now got two of them. Now I'm going to go up to my selection tool up here. Make sure auto select, which is in the top left-hand corner, is turned off. So I've got that copy layer selected. Okay, and then I've got another one now below. So I've got two of them. I'm going to do it once more. So I'm going to duplicate the copy layer again. So I've now got copy 2. Okay, and then with this one, I'm going to do something slightly different though. So I'm going to bring it down, like so. Then I'm going to go edit up the top. So I've still got that second copy selected. I'm going to go edit. Then I'm going to go to transform and scale. And then you'll see, because I've just activated the scale tool, up here, Yeah, just in this space, just here, it's all changed again. The options have changed. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, you can use these as sliders or you can type them in. I'm going to change my width to 200%, and I'm going to change my height to 200%. And then I'm just going to apply that, and then with my selection tool, I'm just going to bring this down here, like so. So I selected my second copy, and I went Edit, Transform, Scale. And when I do that, I can then change on the top menu to 200, 200. Right, let's talk about what no one ever does, myself included. I'm just as guilty of this as the next person, but it's really important. So when I select through these, you'll see, because I've got this selection tool active, this tool is active. When I scroll through the layers, it should highlight the one that I've selected at any given time. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to rename some of these. So rectangle 1, I'm going to call it sketch _1. Okay. My first copy that I made, so sketch _1 is now the top rectangle. The middle rectangle is sketch _2, and then the bottom one we're going to call painting _line. So, why have I just named lots of things? The reason I'm naming things, and I'm making that effort. First off, you create lots of layers in Photoshop. How many of you do stuff in Photoshop? How many of you work in Photoshop with a fairly regular basis? Okay, a few people. How many of you have drawn something in Photoshop or done something in Photoshop and then realize you've done it on the wrong layer? Yeah, everyone, right? Do you know what the worst part about that is? When you've been doing it for like 20 minutes. Yeah, when it's not even a quick Command Z, Control Z fix. You realize, oh no, I came back from lunch and just went in on the wrong layer and it's just gone wrong. Simple things like naming your layers will help you avoid that. For two reasons. First off, you can look at it and know what it means. Yeah? When you've got like layer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 500, you know, they just all stack on top of one another. Who knows what they are? And I know for a fact people do this because I do it. You start squinting and looking closely at the little preview down here, like it will give you some clue as to what's on that layer. You'll sort of look at it and go, oh no, that's the head. That's the head layer. Yeah, so and then you'll go to it and you'll keep working. Just naming them means that when you look down, you get an instant idea of what's in that space. Yeah, and kind of what it is. So the next thing, the next reason it's valuable is that just in making the effort to name the layer, you have committed to memory the fact that that layer has a job. Yeah, that it is to be used for a specific purpose. Okay, and that's really, really important. All right. The other thing that we've done here is I asked, when I typed this, did you see I did sketch _? I didn't do a space. There's a reason for that as well. There's nothing quite as painful. Maybe the Control Z thing is painful actually in the wrong layer drawing. But another painful thing with Photoshop is when it crashes. Yeah? Or it just freezes. It just does that thing where it goes, nah, I can't move. And you just sit there waiting and hoping that whatever you told it to do, it does. Adding spaces in between text. When you add a space, you create an opportunity for Photoshop to corrupt your file or get confused by what you've done. Because when you reduce this file down to its binary form, so it's binary code, Photoshop has to decide whether a space is a 1 or a 0. And that's where the opportunity for corruption can happen. It does happen where some of you may have had this, where you just try and open a file and it just doesn't open. Like it just says, no, you can't anymore. It happens. Putting in underscores instead of spaces is a great way to minimize the opportunity for it to be confused about whether it's a 1 or a 0 when it's reduced to binary. Sounds strange, but it really works. If any of you, and I know some people are from 3D, if any of you are from 3D, never put a space in anything in Maya, only use underscores. Just never put a space in. All right, it's a really good habit to get into. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do, because we're getting there now, we're starting to sort of think about actually painting something, is we're just going to kind of organize these into some half-decent sort of folders. So the way to do folders, just select a layer. So I've got this one just here. And then what I'm going to do is just click that folder and just drop that in. And you'll see that the lineup changes on the files. They change alignment when you drop them into one another. And then I'm going to rename that group. So I'm going to call that one painting. Okay. And then I'm going to shift click these two. And call this one sketch. And you'll see that, let's just bring my layers up so you can see a bit clearer. There you go. So you can see now I've got quite a nice kind of arrangement going on here. Yeah, I've got a painting folder that has the painting line frame in it. I've got a sketch folder that's got sketch_1, sketch_2. Now what I'm going to do is just lock these. Not the groups, just those individual layers I've locked. So the group itself is unlocked. It's just the sketch layers within it are locked. The reason I've done that is I don't want to accidentally mess a layer up. You know, if you don't want to touch a layer, lock it, then you can't touch it. You know, it's really as simple as that. So we're at a point now where we can actually start to think about beginning to kind of apply some tools and start to, you know, create or whatever we're creating. But before we do that, I just want to explain why we've created this shape. You know, what does this actually do? There is a temptation when we're doing a digital painting or a character design to create the file that in the size that we want it. So to actually, instead of creating like a 5,000 by 5,000 pixel, to create a file that is 1920 by 1080. Yeah, the file itself will just be the size of the image we're going to paint. And then we open that up and we start with the layers and we start drawing or painting or whatever we're doing. And then when you've got to make a note on something or you're unsure about how to change something, you either have to open up another file to make those notes or write it on a piece of paper. Neither of those are any good because any notes you write on a piece of paper aren't in Photoshop and anything you write on another file isn't in the file. So what we've done here by doing 5,000 by 5,000 and then creating some sketch areas and a painting area, we've also created this big block of space. And this space can be used for lots of different things. Next week, the week after, with session 2, we will use this space to develop values. So understanding light to dark and getting ready to paint light. You know, we'll use it for that. The week after, for the session after, session 3, we'll use it as a colour palette space to actually build our palette and understand how our colours will work together. But the value is, it exists. We have a space in Photoshop where we can make notes, we can draw things, we can sketch ideas as well, like even just redrawing something a couple of times, like outside of the frame, just to get your head around it. Yes, you created what is effectively dead space that you can use for other purposes. It's a really, really valuable habit to do. Okay, and a lot of the time, I know some of you will do this, where you watch other artists where they paint, like when you watch like YouTube videos and stuff of people doing digital paintings, and they just kind of do it. The thing you don't see is their other screen, which they're not streaming, which has got all their notes on. Yeah, it's got all of their notes, all of their sketches, all of their designs. It's got a rough of the thing they're about to paint, so they're like just copying their own work onto a new canvas. You know, there's all these little tools that are utilised by artists that maybe we're not always aware of, that we don't always see. Yeah, we don't. You know, when we see animation as well, we see the 30,000 frames that make up the film. We never see the other 170,000 frames that never made it. Yeah, the stuff that wasn't any good or didn't quite work. So you got to remember, give yourself space, give yourself a little bit of room to move. Right, so we're going to start some sketching, but before that, I need to make you all feel a little bit sad. Where are we? So what we've done, so already we've kind of got the file format stuff, we've got the basic kind of customizing the interface. We're going to look at sliders in a minute as well. But before we do any of this stuff, and kind of get into the process of creating something, I wanted to talk to you about something that's going to start to hit you when you get into this. And that's this. The taste gap. Some of you already have this, actually. We all have it, actually. That's a terrible thing to say. We've all got this taste gap. The taste gap. So the idea of this principle is that you all know the things you like, right? You know the films you like, you know the artists that you like, the storytellers that you like, and then you look at what you do, and then you look at your own work, and you decide, I'm rubbish, but I can be good if I learn. Like if I get better at something, I'll be better, and I want to be as good as them, or better than them. Yeah, I'm inspired by them, but I think I can take it to the next level. I've got new ideas and new things I want to do. So what you do is you study and you work really hard. Yeah? And what will happen is, as you study and you work really hard and you practice and you refine your skills, so your actual skills start to grow, what will also happen is your taste will start to grow. So you'll be able to look at other people's work and see it in a new light. Understand more about how it was made. You'll understand how colour was applied with better knowledge. You'll understand how they got certain lines or certain shapes or certain textures in their paintings. Yeah? You'll understand how they laid the composition of their images out to get the effect they got. So as your skills go up and you practice and you work harder, your taste and your understanding of what good is starts to go up as well. And what that means is, even though you get better, you will look at your work and you will hate it, because the gap between your skills and your taste, your taste and your skills stays the same. It never closes. Okay, you will never be able to shrink that gap, because the harder you work, the more refined your taste becomes. The best example of this is go and look at the animation that you liked 10 years ago. Go and look at stuff you liked when you were sort of 12 years old, 10 years old, 5. Go and look at that content, and you can look at it now, and for a lot of it, you'll think, I remember this being much better. I feel like it's better animated, or just it was drawn better than it is now. Not always. Some stuff is timeless. Some stuff is always just brilliant. You know, I'm a big fan of artists like Milk Carl, who were animating in like the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I think his work is amazing. But other stuff, you'll look at it and think, it's no good. It's because your taste is refined. All right, so just don't be afraid of that. What I'm trying to warm you to the idea of is that you will always be in pain. Okay, it's always going to hurt. You're always going to feel dissatisfied with your work. But you just keep going. All right, you just keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And a lot of artists, when you hear them, if you speak to artists who are working professionally, none of them will tell you that their work is fantastic. They'll tell you that they work hard and that they're dedicated and that they do their research and they always try and do the best that they can. But very few will tell you that their work is great. Because even at the highest level of ability and success, you will still hate what you do. Your tastes are refined upwards, yeah? And you want to be even better. You want to do better. All right? So just don't panic. You will hate it. Not the process. You'll hate the work. You'll hate the outcome at the end. All right. So what we're going to do today is I've got a challenge for you. By the end of the session, we're going to have some designs in place for the beginnings of a painting. Yeah, the early form of a painting. And as it's Halloween, which is odd because I did this in session 1 way before Halloween and we did the same thing, but now it's more appropriate. I would like everybody, you've got 2 minutes to do this, all right? I would like everybody to find me 5 images of a castle. Go for it now. Save this quickly, Command, Control S or whatever. Find me 5 images of a castle. Where's mine? Don't worry about importing them. Just get them open on separate tabs for now. We will import some, but not quite yet. Okay. So yeah, let's just one more minute. Just find 5 images of a castle.
You can see them in the computer.
Not yet. You can in a second, but for now, can you just get them open on separate tabs, okay? All right. Okay. Time's up. It's only just a couple of castles. This is not hard. All right. So, show of hands. How many of you used Google image search? Okay. How many used Pinterest? Anyone use Bing? Of course they didn't. Okay. Right. So Google image search is like the go-to, isn't it? It's like it's always the kind of the first port of call for searching anything. And actually, when it comes to doing research and building kind of catalogue of materials, Google image search is kind of rubbish. And that's primarily because when you search things through Google image search, one of the main kind of algorithms that it utilizes is it finds images that have the file name that has the word in that you're that has the word that you're searching within its file name. So it will look for all files with the word castle in the file name, and that's where it will draw information from. It's not always reliable. That's why you will probably get a combination not just of photographs of castles, but also of drawings of castles, models of castles, schematics. Yeah, you'll get people in front of castles. Yeah, you get people at Disneyland. Did anyone find any Disneyland pictures? It wouldn't surprise me if on Google image search, page 1, there's Disneyland. You know, so it's not always effective. And the other problem with Google image search is once you've found the image, what do you do with it? Yeah, how do you capture that and control that and organize those images? Because that's a key part of digital painting, is actually knowing where to look. There is a misconception, definitely, within the entire art community, that those of us who are exceptionally good, like you think people who do this for big feature films or television series or video games or whatever, those people at the top of their game are able to just like pull stuff out of their backsides. If you say to them, draw a castle, they just sort of wave a wand and a castle appears on Photoshop that they painted. Or if you say, draw a barbarian, they just do it. And it's not true. It really isn't true. There are very few individuals who have that level of creative visualization as a skill that can just draw stuff from nothing. For everybody else, there's research, yeah, and there's pulling images together, cataloging them, controlling how you research. Really, really important. I can literally only think of one artist off the top of my head who is able to just draw, just like make stuff, and that's a guy called Kim Jong-ji, and he is amazing at it. But I think it's because his brain works differently to everybody else's. Most people have a Pinterest account. Yeah, they catalog their work, they catalog their research. So if you don't have Pinterest, get Pinterest because it's super valuable. Not just because the image search is quite good, so image search functionality on Pinterest, because obviously that's the point of that website, is quite good. But it allows you to do stuff like this. It allows you to actually catalog and control your research. Yeah, put it into folders. Start to pull stuff together. So this was obviously from session 1. We've already done this, but I've got a Pinterest board that's called Castles, and in Castles I've got a subboard here called European. So when I searched for castles, I'm just like you. I'm sure you didn't just see European castles. You would have seen other castles as well. Yeah, you would have seen North African castles. You would have seen castles from Japan. Yeah, you would have seen. There's definitely pictures of ziggurats, which are the Central and South American like angled pyramid castles. You would have seen those as well. Yeah, they're all different types, but they don't fall in the same design mechanic. They're not all the same design identity, so they need to be broken up and need to be catalogued in the right way. So when we're doing research, this is what we should be doing. The next stage of our research is to really look at what we found. So I've got a couple of different ones here. So where have I got? That looks like a French castle. That's Hauska. Hauska Castle in the Czech Republic. I've got Hauska from another angle as well. This is another Czech castle as well. And I'm pretty sure this one is in Scotland. But the reason I've kind of catalogued them together is because when I'm thinking about a design, we have to start to look at similarities. So one of the things I can see here, for example, is this castle, though it is a castle, it's clearly a fortified space. It's got very flat areas across its roof. So it's got like a very clear angular roof that goes all the way around. And I'll go back to the other picture of that castle, of a Czech castle as well. This one's in the Czech Republic. This is Orlik Castle. Can you see the same design identity within it? Yeah, that roof has got a very, very similar design. That says to me, well, do I bring this into my design, into my design, my sketch? Yeah, the point of research is to actually extract pieces of information, yeah, from our research and then bring it into our space. So what I'd like you to do, take a look at the castles you've got. If you've got castles that have similarities, design similarities, keep them and download them. If you don't, I would like you to just get rid of those images, but I want you to have 5 images on the computer, so downloaded onto the computer, of 5 castles that have a similar design identity. Okay, so they kind of feel similar-ish. Yeah, they're just, they're maybe not from the same country or from the same time period, but their design aesthetic is relatively similar. So, for example, German castles have a very specific look to them. French castles have a very significant kind of design identity. Even just searching it. Yeah, see how French castles, they love a good spire. They love a good spiky bit on the top. Very, very, very clear design identity. Now, by comparison, Czech castles. When they load, slightly slower Czech castles, slightly different design identity. Those spires aren't there. We've got a lot of flat roofing, whether it's flat slanted roofing, like quite contemporary roofing, or if we've got like this kind of, like battlements almost across the top. So yeah, they've got kind of unique identities. So that's what I want. 5 images downloaded. Make sure I've actually got some downloaded, because that would be quite embarrassing if I didn't. Where are we? What have we got? Okay, I don't have any downloaded. I'm going to grab mine very quickly as well. Let's go back. I'm just going to screenshot mine for speed. Yes, the reason we're doing this is because the reason the castles was chosen is because this castle has a strong story around it. It has a very, very famous story about the castle. So, okay, it's got a narrative that helps. That will. So. And I'm just going to find some others quickly. Okay. That's right, we're only 4 minutes until the starts. So yeah, I'm just taking screenshots of mine because I don't want to do the download. And I'm also streaming this session, so we don't want to waste time saving stuff. And that was quite an interesting one as well. So I'm just going to grab that. Okay, right. Back to Photoshop. So we've got our castles saved. What we're going to do now is we're going to bring them in. Now, I spotted a little while ago, I said to you, don't download them just yet, or don't put them in Photoshop just yet. Am I right in thinking that when you, because I'm just casting, you did it so quick, I can't remember what I saw, but I think I saw you drag and drop it.
No, it didn't work. I copied it and then pasted it.
So you copied and pasted it. Okay, so when you copy and paste an image, does it embed it directly in the file, or does it dynamically link it into the file? Yeah, right. I don't know either. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. That's the next thing we're going to look at is, well, if you're going to bring files in, you remember we created a lovely big area of dead space where we can utilize for painting. Yeah, we can bring these resources in. We can actually bring them into that space and use them to directly inform what we're creating. But there's a very specific way to do it. So in Photoshop, we go File, up the top here, and then we've got two different methods of placing a file inside our Photoshop document, okay? We've got Place Embedded and Place Linked. Now, when we select Place Embedded, what that will do is it will effectively add that file inside Photoshop. So it exists inside the document, our Photoshop document. It's inside, it's embedded within it. If we select Place Linked, it will do what happens for any of you who use Maya, it will reference the file. So as long as the file stays where it is in the right folder on your computer, the link will be active and you'll be able to see it. So it doesn't take up as much space in Photoshop. But if you move that file on your computer, or you delete it, or you change the name of it, yeah, the link will be broken. So we don't really want to do that. So what we'll do is we'll select Place Embedded, and then I just want you to quickly navigate towards the images that you found. And then what we're going to do, so mine will be in downloads. No, it won't. No, mine will be in desktops. It was screenshots, wasn't it? So mine will be screenshots. Okay, so what I'm going to do with these now is I'm going to go select Place, and then I'm going to bring these in. I don't want to make them massive, but I do want them to be big enough that I can see them clearly. So I've just resized it and then hit Enter to place it, and I'm going to do it again. So if you can just do that for me, bring all 5 in, but don't put them too close together. Like you can put a little bit of overlap on them, but don't like completely overlap them. And definitely don't spread them too far apart. You don't want them in the 4 corners of the file. So you can see I'm just kind of dragging them, bringing them in. They don't all have to be huge either. You know, some can be smaller or bigger or whatever it might be. Pop that in there. Whoops, wrong one. Cancel that. Place Embedded. Last one. So yeah, just going to bring that in there. So I've now got this whole bunch of kind of files. You can see them in my layers down the right hand side, just a load of files. I'm going to select all of those. I'm going to put them in a folder. I'm going to call the folder ref for reference. Yeah, these are my reference files. I'm then going to place them like just at the back. They don't need to be kind of with everything else. Okay. Place them up at the top. Here we go. So I've got all my reference files there, just kind of all together. So now I can look at these and start making some very clear kind of design decisions. Yeah, I'm looking for similarity. So I'm just going to get my brush tool. I'm going to go to my sketch layer. So sketch 1. Okay, let's blow this up nice and big so we can see what we're going to do next. So I've just got like a really kind of basic brush. Actually, I think it's the most basic brush in Photoshop. Just that hard, round brush. I've made it bright green just so it stands out a little bit more. No one's got a problem with me using green, have they? Good. So what I'm looking for here is, where can I see design similarities? So I picked all these images, and I'm just kind of moving through them and thinking, well, where can I see things that look the same? The first thing that stands out for me with these castles is how vertical they are. They've all got really kind of distinct vertical shapes. Yeah? Some castles slope upwards. You know, they've got even some French castles and some English castles, actually, and Welsh castles have like curved walls. Like they're sort of bowed almost to like prevent people leaning against them. So these castles don't have that though. Look at them, just really, really strong vertical lines across all of them. And I think that means that's a design feature. That's clearly a component of the castles from this place. The next thing I can see is that even when there's turrets, so just to make my thing a little bit smaller. That's better. Right. So yeah, I know that. So this one's got turrets, obviously, and this one's got a turret as well. And then yeah, you have got. Actually, they kind of stand out as like small features. They're not like the key component of the castle. And actually, what stands out as a stronger element are these lines here. So I'm just going to bring my tools out a little bit. I'm sure I've got the right one. So yeah, these lines across the top, there's just really, really strong top lines on these castles. So then you've got these lines here. You look at this one, you've got, yes, it has a tower, so it has got like a strong, clean line there. But just going around it, you've just got really, really strong top lines. I think that's a design feature as well. I think that needs to stay. I think it needs to actually become a core component. And look at this one. I mean, it's basically just it's not a great castle, is it? It's just a house, a big house. So yeah, it's got the kind of really, really strong top lines. So I can now take that on board when I'm designing my castle. So with that in mind, let's go up here to our first sketch layer. Here we go. So one of the things I did, if everyone just pauses for a moment, because I don't want to, it's quite a subtle change. When you're adding layers, there's different ways that you can work with those layers. Like in terms of a layer hierarchy, obviously what is at the back is at the bottom. So the bottom of the layers order is at the back of the canvas, the thing right at the back, and the top is the front, which is fine. But sometimes you need to think slightly differently. You might find that actually you want to reorder layers just because it helps you focus a little bit better. So for example, I've got two sketch layers here. I've got sketch 1, that one, and sketch 2. Now sketch 2 was made after sketch 1. So actually when it was made, it sat that way round in Photoshop. Sketch 1 underneath, sketch 2 above. But when you think about the layout of the actual canvas, sketch 1 is at the top. And sketch 2 is at the bottom. So the simplest thing to do is just to reorder them. Yeah, so I'm lining this up with the visual data. It's just a good way of knowing, kind of reminding yourself where you are. So what I've now done is I did all that sketching, obviously. I drew all of these little notes, these notes I made here on this layer. I made a layer that sits between sketch 1 and sketch 2. And this is going to be like my kind of main drawing layer. This is where I'm going to work, okay? So what I might do, I don't need to keep these green lines. That was more for your reference. So I'm just going to take a moment to remove them. There we go. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to go up to, before I start drawing, I'm just going to set my brush so it works the way I want it to. Do you remember we set hue saturation? and brightness, I'm going to do a similar thing. So I'm going to turn my saturation down to 0. So you should have, if you don't have these sliders in the top right hand corner, the way to get them is on the color tab. You go to the little menu on the right hand side, and you've got 2 areas that you can add content. You've got the actual spectrum space, and then you've got the slider space. So the best thing to use is the HSB sliders, so hue, saturation, brightness sliders. And then probably RGB spectrum is a good one to use. You can also use, current colors isn't too bad. So current colors will show you like these 2 colors together. Yeah, kind of where they sit. But, it's entirely up to you. So I've turned saturation down to 0. And then I'm going to turn my brightness, sorry, wrong one. Let's put that back to white. This one. So saturation down to 0. Brightness down to about 30, between 35 and 40. And then in terms of brushes, okay, so everyone's got the brushes that they like. But sometimes people can get a little bit obsessive about having brushes. Brushes will not make you good. Okay? They just won't. It's how you use them. So don't worry about having a good brush set or finding good brushes. Photoshop has got the brushes you need. You will, over time, develop your own brush set. Yeah, you'll see other people's brushes and you'll use them and they'll become part of your palette. But don't get hung up on it. It's not really a big deal. Okay, a good artist can use anything. They don't need specialist brushes to create the right impact. If you want to see that in the flesh, go and look at a guy called Craig Mullins. Craig Mullins was painting digital before there were even drawing tablets. He was doing it with a box, and his work is insanely good. So I'm just going to go for a dry media brush. So I'm just going to go for I've got like a HB brush that I use, but you can use pretty much anything. It doesn't really matter all that much. And then I'm on that sketch layer, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to, so see how this layer is beneath the locked sketch layer. So my layer 1, I'm going to call it S_1 because it's sketch. So it's beneath the sketch layer. It's beneath it, and the reason for that is that now when I draw, it draws behind it naturally. It kind of keeps that frame in the foreground. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to think, well, okay, I know what the rough shape of my castle is. How do I want to depict it? How do I want to visualize that? The first thing you need to work out is where's your camera. So when we look at a painting, we are looking through someone's eyes. So it is either a camera sitting looking at a space, or it is through a person's view that we're looking at something. So we need to think, how high up or how low down is that person? The horizon line is the clue that helps us understand that. So if you put your horizon line really high up like this, what you're saying is that the viewpoint is also very high up. So it's really, really high in the sky because you're looking down at a lot of space below you. Yeah, your horizon line's high in your view because you're really high up. If you draw your horizon line very low, like that, you're implying that you are very small and everything is above you. So you're looking upwards like that at an object. So you've got to think very careful about where you place the horizon line. Do not, please do not put your horizon line through the middle. Okay? Because that creates a symmetrical shape. And symmetry is something we should avoid when we're painting. Avoid symmetry. It makes people feel uncomfortable. Asymmetry is beauty. Symmetry is weird. Alright? So never put your horizon line through the middle. If you ever want to see this in practice, I'm going to put my horizon line sort of just coming up to 2/3. So not the middle, but not right down too low. So yes, my horizon lines are out there. If you ever want to see this for yourself and understand the horizon line thing about it being low and high, if you stand up and kind of look as far into the distance as you can. So I can see out the windows and I can see the tops of the trees and the buildings, and they're about my eye line through that window. If I go like this and tilt my head upwards, I can see the same horizon line, but now it's in my peripheral vision at the bottom. If I look down, I can still see it, but now it's in the peripheral vision at the top. Same principle on camera. Yeah, that tilt really, really matters because it helps you understand how high up or how low down you are. You don't want to go up here or down here. You don't want to go too low. If you go too low, you're going to end up creating a very awkward situation for yourself. So we place our horizon line in, and then we can start to think, okay, well, if that's my horizon line, what about distance? So one of the great ways to understand distance is with little people. You place someone's head on the horizon line. Like this, okay? So I'm gonna mark actually with a guide point. So that's my horizon line. I've placed this little head on that horizon line. If I draw the same head, so this person's this big, this person's this big. Can you see straight away how that creates a sense of depth? Like, when you think about what I've just done, all I've done is I've placed two heads on a horizon line at different sizes and then scaled the bodies appropriately. And straight away it implies this one's closer to the camera and this one's further away. So the horizon line, it's a really weird thing, but everyone, from your viewpoint, it sounds so odd to say, right? But from your eyes, everybody's stuff lines up the same on the horizon line. Okay? So what do we mean by that? Well, if you stand on a flat surface, yeah, and you're looking at someone, and their shoulders are on the horizon line, yeah, if someone else stands 100 feet behind them or 100 meters behind them, their shoulders are on the horizon line too. They line up. That's how our brains interpret depth. So we need to think about that when we're drawing. It's like, okay, if this is where my horizon line is, how far away is that line? Like how far are we looking? Are we looking across a great distance of a flat surface, or are we looking at a shorter distance and it's obscured, and this is really just a guide point for us to understand our height in comparison to other objects? So I'm going to keep, this is the horizon line I'm working with. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to mark in kind of what the absolute background is of this space. So you have to bear with me. I don't like using the eraser, so I tend to do everything with the lasso tool. It's just a habit, it's just how I prefer to work. But what I'm going to, so let's just make this a little bit lighter, up to about 30. But I think with this horizon line, I want to go slightly above it. I want to imply that there's a little bit of obstruction to it. So I'm just going to lift it up slightly on this side. And then on this side, I'm going to obstruct it completely. So I'm going to go way, way higher. Then what I'm going to do is think, well, if that's my top horizon line, you know, how do I measure a sense of distance? Well, one of the easiest things to do is foreground and background objects. So I'm going to place my castle up here. I'm going to draw it on kind of the top of a hillside. The reason I'm doing that is I just picked that up from this, is that, see how, with the exception of the boat castle down here on the lake, the other castles are lifted off the ground. They're higher, they have the high ground, which makes sense. It's a castle, it's a defensive structure, so it should be higher. So I'm going to lift my castle up kind of into this space up here. So I'm going to kind of create there's going to be like a hillside here that kind of comes down into the foreground. I'm just marking it with very gentle lines at the moment. And then I've got this background here. And then I'm thinking, well, okay, how do I make it feel like that's further away? Well, add some objects. So for example, if I say, right, beneath the castle, in the foreground, I've got trees. Okay, and my trees kind of occupy space like this. Yeah? And I've said that the horizon line passes through the trees at about the sort of 10 feet mark, at about 8 to 10 feet in the air. If I then draw trees over here much smaller, come back. I hate these little buttons. Get back to there, please. It's better, thank you. Let's just fix that. So if the trees are approximately this high here, yeah, so I've just got some trees. I'm going to draw a load more in a second. It means the trees over here, kind of this high. Now that doesn't mean they're the only ones I can draw. I can put in a whole forest over here if I wanted to. But I'm just establishing some rules of distance, like how far away are these objects. The next thing I want is some kind of clear foreground space. So one of the things I'm going to do, I'm going to put a road in. It seems like a very obvious thing to do, but the reason people do it is because it works. Go. So I'm creating a sense of a foreground. Yeah, I'm sort of spacing objects out. So I can put some rocks here. I could even put some larger trees. So if I wanted to really establish it, you know, I said the trees are like 8 feet off the ground. There's no reason why I can't like put a tree like that, like right in the foreground, to really kind of hit home the idea. Yeah, so I'm establishing that that's 10 feet, that's 10 feet, these ones back here are 10 feet. So I'm creating a sense of depth. I'm just going to move this, this guide out. There we go. Just so you can see what I'm doing a little bit clearer. So that's kind of my basic space. And then you can even put, like we could put some like craggy mountains or something in the background just to break the space up. But this is, what's interesting is you can break the space up with like background objects, but you still have a horizon line. You still have a clear point here. Yeah, you should be able to see that. So if I make it a bit larger, you still have a clear kind of point here that's absolutely the horizon. So next thing I'm going to do is think, well, okay, if this is kind of my background, now I can kind of paint in the castle, or sketch in the castle. So just to go back, I've got strong lines. Like I said, your castles are different. You might have different shapes, but I've got strong vertical lines, strong roof lines. So those are the lines that I'll put in now. So I want it to really kind of stand up from the skyline. The other thing I need to establish, I'm going to put this right kind of, I'll put it back. I've got a vanishing point as well. I do have a perspective point. I need to be kind of considerate of that. See, I'm just now kind of putting in all, like, it's the basic design identity. It's nothing too strong or too intense. It's really just pinning down, like, what rough, like, approximately does this building look like? How does it take form? It's really, really kind of ugly at the moment. But what we're doing is we're basically creating an imprint. So I want some more trees. Definitely kind of here, but I also want rocks, so I want this area to kind of feel rocky and broken. And then I need foreground objects, so I'm going to put some tree stumps. So again, I'm thinking about, like, you know, what's the shape of this tree on the left in comparison to this foreground tree? How do these two objects kind of work together? I'm just going to pull up it because I want to make sure that I haven't kind of knocked anything out of the... And make sure my perspective is right as well. Like, you do need sort of good drafting skills with this, like, and that only comes from doing it often. You know, I can start putting in additional information, like it's going to have some windows. You can even do like that the gate point, actually. That'd be quite a nice little kind of addition to put in there. Yeah, to imply that pathway somehow. You know, we can't see where the path goes, it's obscured by the rocks, but it might move kind of round that way and then up, perhaps. Another piece of information, so it's like you've always got to be adding that information in where you can. So I'm going to try and keep it off to the right hand side a bit. So I'm going to go there. Nice and thin. And we'll put a signpost. Okay, so I'm going to give you kind of, sort of 5-10 minutes maybe, just to kind of work through this, okay? Just start to kind of put your ideas down. I'm going to go back here as well, so it's like, what other piece of design identity? Like I said, I liked that they had this just very singular kind of portcullis style doorway, so that's kind of gone as a sketch. I've got sun towers. I think it could be amplified further with some like chimney stacks. I think would work really nicely. I like the idea of it kind of being at the bottom here, just being obscured almost by trees. But you don't want the trees to really stand out too much. So right, can everyone just, in fact, before I give you 15 minutes to work on this, can you all just push? What's it going to be for you? Mine's Shift Command S, so yours might be Control Shift S, and bring up this screen. Digital Arts. Is Haskell in there? No, it's not. I wonder where that went. Okay. Just going to give this a name. I'm not going to hit enter, but I just want to explain a good little technique that might be valuable to you. When we're saving a file, the standard Photoshop file is a .psd file. Yeah, this one, .psd. It's useful, you know, not knocking it at all. It's a great file. It's very stable compared to a lot of file types. And obviously it knows what it is. It works in Photoshop. But there's another file format that can be quite useful when you're doing digital painting. And that is the large document format, or .psb. The reason it can be useful is because it's got a higher compression rate, so it keeps your file a little bit smaller. If you think about how many layers you might work on, or how much reference material you might bring in, Photoshop files can get big. They can go into the hundreds of megabytes, easily go into the hundreds of megabytes actually sometimes. So using .psb files is a handy way to kind of keep that down. So just, can you just save your work? And call mine Haskell, because I've got another Haskell here somewhere. All right, so but give you about 5-10 minutes just to keep sketching it very rough, nothing too complex at this stage. Session 1. just another minute or two, and then we need to sort of pause and look at what the kind of next natural step is. Right, okay, can everyone just sort of pause where you are? So, you should have something that kind of looks hideous. If I'm honest, it should be ugly. It should be rough. It should be about understanding where you're going to place objects, not drawing them in, just planning them out. Just saying that this is the rough kind of idea. Now, the reason you've got two spaces is to do this twice. Is to always, whenever you're designing something or painting something, always consider the alternative. Yeah. If this isn't working, how long do I try and fix it before I just move on to a different idea? Yeah, because I think sometimes we do that as artists. We try so hard to make our work good that we don't always recognize the fact that maybe we started with a bad idea in the first place. Like, you can't make a bad idea into a good product. You just can't. It will only ever be an okay product at best. And it's very easy to turn a good idea into a bad product. You know, that's just the challenge we face. So having this second space is a good way to use it. What I would say, good way to fight that. But what I would say to you is, with the second space that you've got, don't squander that space. And what I mean by that is, don't draw the same thing again. Yeah, you've got a second frame there to do an alternative version of a design or a painting. Don't just draw the same thing again in the next one and hope you draw it better. All right, it's not going to work. So what I've done here is I've actually done as close to the opposite as I could get. So what I looked for was that, so I looked at my own design and thought, well, what have I got? I've got a kind of bottom third horizon line. I've got quite intense foreground objects, and they're designed to scale. So they're like what we call scaling devices. They let me know kind of how big I am in the space and how far away those objects are. Yes, I've got those, and I've got kind of a very centralized path that just sort of moves upwards. Doesn't really cover a lot of distance or space across the design itself. So, and then my castle, which I can see. Or maybe it's where I'm standing, like the perspective is completely wrong, but on that it looks okay. So I think it's just where I'm standing too close to the table. Yeah, so I've got this castle shape that's quite domineering at the top of the frame. Yeah, it's kind of a very imposing shape right up the top here. Which is fine, but is there an alternative? So with the other frame, I tried to do the exact opposite. So what if I'm looking down on the castle? Yeah, I took reference from the fact that I've got so much aerial photography in my research, and thought to myself, well, yeah, why not have it so that you're like, so the castle's almost like on the coastline, and it's down inside a harbour, like those sorts of cliff faces. And to get to it, you have to kind of move down some kind of path. Yeah, so try and get more coverage across the space, which means that I've got this up here. I haven't even figured this out yet, but I think it has to be heavy foreground again. So there is similarity in terms of like where I'm placing like depth spaces. So foreground, yeah, background, midground. You know, there is that similarity. But the actual perspective, I've gone from looking really low down, looking up at something, to being really high up, looking down at something, just as an alternative. It's not better, it's just a different choice. So if I get really stuck on one of them, I can go, well, maybe I can save the other one. Maybe I can find a way to make that work. The other thing I've got as well in my second one, so my first one is I've got the sky as a very dominant shape. So when you think about this as just flat image, don't think about the depth of it or the objects, just think about it as shapes. The sky here occupies almost a third of the entire canvas is sky. That's a lot of sky. By comparison, this one, this is all intended up here to be, this is all, up here is all caves, all cliffs as well. So it's intended actually that there's like no sky at all. That's not sky. What's the ability to draw? Oh look, I made it too light. That's why I was like, I'm at 56. Why is it going so weird? Yeah, so it's just going to be kind of cliffs. Yeah, going all the way up is the plan anyway. But that's what I'm sort of working with at the moment. Now, what we now need to do, if we've got the beginnings of like this rough ugly, we then need to think about, well, that's not enough. We need detail, and we need story detail. Sometimes when we add detail to a drawing or a painting, we do it for the sake of it, and we don't really think, why are we adding these components? What's the narrative that I'm delivering here? So this was from the first session. I forgot what I used a phrase to help me design the narrative. So the phrase I used was the phrase was a gateway to the old ones. So I'm going to use that same phrase again for this. So I'm kind of going for like a Lovecraftian, horror, kind of spooky castle theme. It's very in keeping with this castle that I used as reference. I don't know if anyone knows. Do you know about Hauska Castle? It's a castle that's supposedly got the gate to hell underneath it. Very interesting. You should read up on it. It's crazy. The castle's inside out. So it's designed to keep something in and not to keep people out. Like all the battlements are on the inside facing inwards and not on the outside facing outwards. Hauska Castle. It's in the Czech Republic. Yeah. So, you know, it's kind of fitting. It's kind of creepy, a bit spooky, Halloween and all that. So, you know, if that's my theme, what was it again? A gateway to the old ones. What can I do to build some sense of that narrative into the drawing? So what I'm going to do, I've got notice as well. Sorry, I didn't mention this. My second drawing, I drew on a separate frame. And can you see how it's underneath Sketch 2's frame layer? Yes, I'm separating them all out, giving myself distance. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to my S1 layer, so this one here. I'm going to reduce its opacity down, maybe %. Yeah, that's not too bad. I'm going to create a new layer above it. And I'm going to call this S1 line. So this is a cleanup layer. I'm going in with cleaner information. So now I'm going to go for a slightly darker pencil. I'm going down to about 20, if it will let me. Might even go lower than that, actually. Go to about 15. I don't want to go any lower, really. You should never really go lower than 10 unless you absolutely have to with your line work. Yeah, that'll do. So what I'm going to do now, I made it a bit smaller as well, so 7 pixels. Might even go lower than that. I might go down to like 5. Yeah, that'll do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start looking at this frame. I've reduced the opacity, and now I can think to myself, okay, well, what does this actually look like? Well, you know, it's all well and good placing the shapes in there, but any details I add need to build to the narrative. So one of the things I'm definitely going to do is I said I was going to put like tree stumps in here, and I am going to do that. So I'm just going to sketch these in now. And the reason I'm putting tree stumps in is because I quite like the idea of them like being lit up. So what do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to paint onto these like little lanterns and candles and stuff, almost like people have come along and like left little tributes, like paying respects to something. And I think that will build to this idea of like, you know, devil worship or whatever it might be. I don't know. I think it just adds to the narrative. So on this, I'm going to draw in there'll be like little trinkets and maybe like some pictures and things like that, just kind of lent against it. And then the actual signpost itself, I think there's something kind of fitting with the theme to keep that kind of crucifix shape. So I'm just going to clean that up a little bit. And then the two signs on it, I'm going to have those as hanging signs. So you see, I'm just kind of going in and just kind of refining the details of the line work, just really sort of making sense of it as best I can. And then in front of that, let's get that a bit lower actually, because we want some real height on it. So that, yeah, in front of that, I'll put some stuff in as well, like some boxes or something. And then I'm going to put another one. So again, I'm building that idea of distance. I'm going to put another tree stump in there, another tree stump in there. So it looks like, so it's not just like, oh, there's two random tree stumps for no reason whatsoever. I almost want to make it look like this was once upon a time, it was dense forest, but it's been cut back to create the road. Yeah, so it's like the forest has been kind of removed. So I'm just going to sketch in a few more of these, just keeping it, it's still quite rough and it's still just a planning idea. And then over this side, so this I think is really going to work actually. This kind of, I'm going to have like a really gnarled tree. Yeah, something that kind of just breaks that space up really nicely. There we go, that'll do for now. So again, this idea of like a sort of unnaturally grown tree, that's going to be flapped out. And then the idea is then behind it, I can actually mark in like some bigger trees. So I'm sort of, again, I'm building on this idea that, yeah, there was a forest here. If there was kind of they don't need to be detailed either, because this is just the line work. I'd go, when we apply color to this, we'll kind of, we'll pad it out and we'll add more content. But for the moment, the most important things in this, actually, when we're doing this kind of like sketchy detail that's supposed to be more detailed, is just starting to establish what we can and can't see. So I'm going to turn this from a series of lines into an actual shape that's a bit more solid. So this one, I'm just going to take that down a bit further. Just really going to get that down. That's it. So again, that's just going to build in this idea of, oh yeah, like there was once upon a time there was a forest there, and then we said that there was going to be a rocky, this was all going to be very, very rocky outcrops. So just the idea of like, yeah, you've got like sheared surfaces and things. That's wrong. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm just going in and like basically adding the narrative, yeah, creating a sense of story to this, giving it a bit more kind of purpose. I like the idea of just like having like some, possibly in the background around this point. You need again something else for scale, something that's like semi-recognizable. So like an old wagon or something that you can just kind of sketch it in, just to allude to something that's believable as a piece of design. Like, that it's not just an empty, vacant space, that there's something happening within the story. You can even put, so again for scale, signpost. Yeah, placing the two objects side by side creates a sense of depth. So I'm starting to explain to my viewer, like, there's a distance between here and here. Yeah, there's an actual z-axis distance. We're going backwards into that space. Wow, it's like 10 to 4 already. Time is running out. So I'm going to I'm keeping into this. So I'm going to go in like one thing at a time. So again, I said there would be a tree. There would be trees kind of here that were a bit more solid. Again, I'm still keeping it rough and sketchy, but I'm just starting to turn it into more solid spaces. Obviously, I'm going to leave a gap between these trees for stylistic purposes, because I want my audience to see the gate that I've drawn in. Yeah, this gate here, I want this to be visible. It needs to be visible, so that can be left in. And then with the actual building itself, what I can start to do is draw in some of the details. So I can move away from these kind of unclean and start moving towards some clean ones. So that's where I realised it would be nice if I could bring this hue on a little bit closer. Yeah, so just sort of looking at this space, thinking, okay, like how does this actually work? It's going to have a line like that. I think it needs to have some vertical content there as well. So you can see I'm throwing in like some small windows that just kind of break up that difficult angle that I've created, because I drew quite a complex angle there. I need to find a way to break that up. And then this one, I'll probably break this shape this way so it sticks out a little bit. So it's not, I don't want it to be like a perfectly flat shape, I want it to be slightly. It's just like doing things like mapping out approximately kind of where a drawing is. So not where a drawing is, where the windows are and stuff. So what the windows look like in the space. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm just kind of moving through it, and I'm starting to add progressively more and more detail. Just keep building the detail in. You are going to get some line like that. So what we do then, after we've done this pass, I might actually line that way. That's it. You can see what I'm doing is I'm just making some sort of editorial decisions about the actual architecture. So I'm like, no, it's not going to be a pitched roof. Now it's going to be a slanted roof kind of against that surface. And then I'm going to put some larger, more established windows here either side, one obscured as well. So we want obscured there, which is really nice. So the reason this is it's quite nice to obscure things like windows is because they emit light. It means I can create a sharp outline around the trees. So placing objects in the background that emit light behind objects that block it, allow you to create strong silhouettes. And then I've got, because I've got a little outcrop there, I need to kind of keep that in. So let's put that there. And then up here as well, I can start to think about, well, what if I put in, you know, windows like this? Not that one, that's awful. Yeah, like what's the impact of something like that? So you can see already, if I just jump between these two, like we're already adding just much more detail in. We're actually starting to refine it, give it some narrative, some purpose. The other thing I'll probably do as well is kind of cut in some shapes on this. So like this. So I'm just cutting in some shapes that I'll use for clouds. So when I paint when I paint clouds in, I like the idea of like almost like the clouds can't touch the castle, or if they can, they're like really kind of broken. So I'm going to put like a really small kind of broken cloud there. But then we've got, I said I'd do like really vague mountains in the background, which I probably still can. I might get them lower actually. Get them lower like that. So I'll take this out. So yeah, I'm just making kind of those lines in. Right, last thing I'm going to do on this painting today, actually, so we've still got to get those in. Sorry, I just realised I've got some tree trunk stumps there that need to come in. So they need to be kind of marked. Right, save it again. So the last thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to use the like super basic Photoshop brush for this, where is it? The soft round, that's the one. I'm going to create a new layer between S1 and S line. I'm just going to call it light_1. Oh, not exclamation mark. Don't ever use symbols in your layers. Again, it's just another opportunity for your file to go funny. So what I'm going to do with this one, super soft. I'm just going to go in and think, okay, well, where are the actual light sources and where are the not light sources? So, I need myself for this. So I don't want too much light here. Yeah, I want that as shadow. Make that softer if I can. Yeah, I want here to be kind of softer as well. Doing it very kind of basic at the moment, but it will fill out. Let's make it go up a little bit. This is going to be darker here. That. Here as well, it's going to be darker. We're not going into light today in any great detail. Like we've got plenty of time to worry about light. In the next session, actually, session 2 is where you kind of start thinking about light. So that area is going to be darker. This area is definitely going to be darker. And then we've got, yeah, the underside of the trees just here. Will be darker. And then the foreground on these trees will be darker as well. And then just a little bit of this tree, not a lot of it actually, will be darker. And then there'll be patches of darkness kind of up here. So I know it seems like a very strange thing to do, like what is it playing at? But the idea of mapping the light like this is really helpful, because what it will do is it will give you a clear understanding of where you actually need to paint in. So that if I take this out now, start to kind of reveal a little bit of kind of the lighting structure of the painting. Just at a basic level, nothing. It's not going to be too detailed at this stage. It's just to help me understand, like when I start to apply it, like paint light into this, like what's that? What does that mean? Like what is that actually going to do? Cutting into that, cutting into it from the underside as well, because you want like a nice kind of crisp bit of light over that side. Oop, too much. Save the tree. Again, and we want some hard cuts of light here as well. And then I'm just going to go back on my brush tool. I might just use hard round for this. It's a bit risky, but we'll go for it. And then go up to the lighter. So 50 was the middle, remember? So I'm going to go up to like 59. And then on 59, just painting, well, where is it definitely going to be lighter? Let's go up by it. Right. So yeah, now I'm just sort of painting in areas of like, you know, where's that light actually going to hit? Kind of really hard. Here and here. And you get loads of light kind of hitting the top of these rocks. You're going to get light hitting the outside edges of these trees. I should explain why in a second. Yes. It's definitely going to happen, and we're definitely going to have artificial light emanating from any windows that we've got. So I'm just starting to kind of map in kind of where that light's coming from. I'm just going to take this down a little bit, so go down to like 55. Just lower it, soften it a bit, because it's also going to be here. So the clouds themselves. So we've got this idea of like moonlight and clouds cutting into one another. I'm just going to cut that in like that. And then here, it's 4 o'clock. So tree stumps will be in shadow because they're kind of cast behind. So there it is. There's kind of the beginnings of our design. What I would say at this stage, what you are looking at, in fact, if we put S1 in front of it, we're getting a clear understanding. What we're looking at here is the plans for a painting. That is the way to think about this. These are the plans for a painting. They are not the painting itself. They are just the very, very beginning of that. Okay, so this is what I'd like you to do, is kind of don't worry too much about light at this stage. What I'd like you to worry about more is getting between these 2 points in time. So getting from, let's take my light out. Let's put this back up to where it should be. Put it back up to 100. Right, so I want you to get from something that's like a rough plan like that and get towards something that's starting to clean up and to become a little bit clearer and a little bit crisper. All right, that's your target for this session. Because what we're going to do in the next session is actually look at, okay, how do you actually paint light? It's all well and good me going planning light, because that's what that is. That's just a rough light plan. Yeah. But now we need to look at how do you actually go in there and start to paint light on an object, and what happens when you do that, and what's the impact of those kind of processes. All right. Make sure you save your work. Save that again. And then just going back to this. We're going to do this, so this photo actually we're going to look at as part of this light session. So we used one method of bringing stuff in, which was just like in place embedded, bring it in. What I'm going to show you how to do is how to chop stuff up very quickly using the lasso tools and the move tools and the trim tools to like use photos to composite work together. So to get textures and to get ideas and stuff. But hopefully now, you should be at a point where you understand what the sliders are, like hue, saturation, brightness sliders, and how to move them, how to manage your layers, how to navigate from the tools to the options to the adjustments. save in the right file formats. How to see is that idea of just don't worry that you hate yourself and hate your work. That's normal. It will never go away. You'll just learn to live with it. And then this idea of how to import material and how to use that research material. So the plan for the next sessions, we're looking at thumbnailing, which is a very simplified version of what we're doing today. It's much faster. What took us half hour today, we can do in 5 minutes with a thumbnail. And then this idea of painting light and refining shapes and actually beginning to apply depth, like painting, basically, because this wasn't painting, this is drawing. But we need to move towards that process of actually painting. So that's our next step. But we're also going to throw in the idea of keyframing and what that means, and actual character performance within a shot. And I'm not going to use the same script for that, or the same narrative. We're going to use a different bit of narrative. So that's it. We are kind of done for today. So what I would ask is this sketching process. So just going back to Photoshop, this cleaning up, adding the windows, drawing in details on the plants, and I would expect a sketch like this to take you about 2 hours. 2 hours where you can, and then you should be at a point where you can go, yeah, I know exactly what I've got to paint. Like I understand exactly where the paint has got to be applied here in order to bring this to life. Because there's no area of this where I don't understand what that squiggly line is. Yeah, every line will have a purpose. It represents a thing. So you need to keep kind of plugging away and keep adding the detail. So you can see on mine, I've got loads of windows to add. So loads of window work, the guttering around the roof. I need to do something with this to clean this shape up and give it a lot more definition. My trees have got no front definition, and the underside needs cleaning up. I've got basically no information on the path other than that it exists. So I need to clean this up and decide, well, is this mud? Is it brick? Is it gravel? Like what material is it made of, and how the light is going to potentially affect that. So I've got that to clear up. I've got a very big dead area just here as well. So I've got nothing on this tree, so I need to work out what overlaps or laps through it, or laps around it, and fill that information out as well. So this one's probably got at least 45 before I would feel comfortable actually applying any paints to it. Yeah, so keep working into those details. So yeah, you've got this space for about another 45 minutes or so. Just keep working away at it. Okay, just keep going. And if you're starting to worry too much about stuff, step backwards and rethink it. All right. So I put light in just to show you roughly what light looks like. Don't start adding light into yours until you've got all that line work in. All right, because you'll confuse yourself and you'll start to wonder about where is the moon, where is the sun, and you'll ask whole different questions. Start with those start with the structural details. Get all of that really, really crisp and clean. And if you don't know what the details look like, slide your frame to the right and zoom in on your images. Look at what actual shape windows do they use? What's the lining of the windows? Do they go in? Are they equal numbers across the horizontally? So is it always 4 on each wall, or are they equal numbers vertically? How many floors high? How many stories is this castle? Yeah, these are the questions you have to ask yourself to start getting the right kind of detailed information in. Okay, so really start planning that information. Start putting it in there. Okay, and then next week we'll work from a slightly different piece of material. But what I want you to be able to do, and it sounds a bit strange, but right at the end of the digital arts kind of toolkit, I want you to want to go back and finish this castle with a sense of confidence. Like, I can go and do that now. I can go and paint that just because I know how to do it. Right, but that is it. Yeah, we are done for today. So yeah, use the space. If you want to take a break for a bit first, because I know it gets a bit stuffy in here, you're more than welcome to. And then just keep kind of plugging away at this and keep saving it as well, please.